I would like to go in and just make that distinction between AI literacy and AI fluency. I know this is, something that we've been speaking about here, and I have a feeling that you can do that rather quick, and then maybe just walk me through the core components of this AI fluency model that you have.
Look, I've used this analogy several times. I'll just use it very quickly here again. I think the word fluency is a really good launch point into the distinction, right? I think when we all speak one or two languages. If you're there's like if you're from Canada, you're most likely speaking some version of French and English, and you're able to get around, right? But we know when you speak multiple languages, you're fluent in some languages and you are literate in others, right? So take me, for instance. English is my first language at this stage, but I am literate in Spanish. I can understand the words, I can understand the sentence construction, but I couldn't speak in Spanish to save my life, right? And but literate gets me around enough to kind of do the bare bone things. But recently, I was in India. I speak three Indian languages. I can go to that state, and I'm fluent in those languages. And I can look like a local, going into those states speaking those languages. Think about that with AI. Today, most people are either AI fearful, which is on the left-hand side, which you talked about, or most of them are somewhere in the middle. They've used ChatGPT. They've probably asked it for a recipe. They've asked it for travel plans. They're literate because they all know ChatGPT. But even that has to be a little bit more knowledgeable because and then AI fluent on the other end is when you truly understand the tools and what can be used for what and others, you get to a different level of understanding of how you can use AI. And just to kind of finish that point, even in the AI literate, most people just use ChatGPT and stick with it. But if you knew that a Claude has different strengths than a Gemini, has different strengths than a ChatGPT versus a Perplexity, then you would choose the right tool for the job, right? You're not going to go and try to, you're not going to go try to put a screw into a wood plank using a hammer. You're going to use a screwdriver for that, right? But you'll use a hammer if you're banging a nail into that same plank. So knowing what tool to use is important, and that's part of basic understanding that goes beyond literacy into fluency because you know the risks and you know how to be able to use that. And I think that basic level of understanding has to happen on both sides of that barbell I talked about. Right? You absolutely have to do it. It's probably easier to do with the next generation coming in because they probably tried more tools than you can list. But on the other end, it's like, that myopic view that I said, right, really is tough to kind of break through and get them to say, like, look, you got to kind of use the right tools for the right job on that front. And by the way, just so that the audience doesn't get confused, all of our conversation so far has just been on generative AI, right? Like, the ChatGPTs and others. When you start thinking about generative AI, here's the simplest way I tell people. Generative AI is probabilistic. What that really means is the way the LLM models work, if you ask it the same question 3 times, you're not going to get exactly the same answer. It's because it's picking the words and making that sentence construction so that you have that response. No business process, no core business process can operate on a probabilistic model. Think about that customer service representative that you're calling in for a billing question. And you happen to get disconnected and you call the second time. You want the same answer. Business processes require deterministic answers. So I've got to be able to get to a constant answer on that piece. One of that big reason why the 85% of projects fail and all those things is because people not knowing the tools, using something like generative AI to solve a deterministic problem. There are multiple options in AI, but knowing that is important. And knowing that, by the way, is extremely important if you're an executive, because you're the person making the choice to say, do this versus that. And that's why, back to this AI fluency, it applies to every level of the organization.